In 586 BCE, the Babylonian Empire breached the walls of Jerusalem, destroyed the temple, and dragged the population into exile. To the Israelites, this was devastating. It meant a severing of the covenant itself. Centuries earlier at Mount Sinai, Yahweh established a binding relationship with Israel, formalized through the giving of the Torah, the law. This is a traditional Torah scroll, housing the laws given at Sinai. The text within is holy and perfect, but its medium, ink on parchment, originally chiseled into external stone tablets, carried a fatal limitation. It remained entirely outside the human body. The text demanded absolute loyalty, but Israel possessed an internal, stubborn resistance to it. The Hebrew prophets frequently diagnosed this systemic flaw as a heart of stone. Because the law was external and the heart was hard, the Israelites repeatedly violated the terms of the agreement. Over centuries, these violations accumulated, triggering the severe divine judgments explicitly outlined in the Book of Deuteronomy. The physical consequence of that rebellion is the total desolation of Jerusalem, forcing the people out of the Promised Land. Removing them from the land mirrored a much deeper tragedy, a complete spiritual alienation from Yahweh's presence. The exile served as a severe purgative discipline. It proved definitively that an external law cannot cure an internal rebellion. The covenant required a mechanical update. Amidst the ashes of this judgment, Yahweh reveals a specific hope of restoration to the exiles. On the eve of Jerusalem's destruction, the prophet Jeremiah delivers a singular promise. He writes the only explicit reference to a new covenant found in the entire Hebrew Bible. Jeremiah uses the term Brit Chadashah. The root of Chadashah, HDS, translates directly to renew, repair, or restore. It does not mean replace. The content of the Torah is not being abrogated or altered. Yahweh is not scrapping the original agreement to invent a new religion. This ancient Hebrew manuscript details the exact mechanical shift. Yahweh declares, "I will put my law within them, and I will write it on their hearts." The location of the Torah moves from external stone directly into human volition. The immediate consequence of this internal shift is universal access. No longer will priests and mediators be required to teach the law. The people will intuitively know Yahweh. This entire transformation rests entirely on a structural foundation, the absolute, permanent forgiveness of sins. The Brit Chadashah fulfills the ultimate Deuteronomic ideal. By shifting the Torah to the heart, Yahweh legally and spiritually dissolves the barrier of human guilt to secure permanent communion. Jeremiah explains this using a legal treaty framework. The prophet Ezekiel describes the exact same inner transformation, but he uses the priestly categories of ritual purity. Ezekiel outlines a three-stage sequence, starting with an eschatological ritual cleansing, washing the people entirely free from moral defilement. Next comes a surgical extraction. The rigid heart of stone is removed and replaced by a responsive heart of flesh, driven completely by the indwelling Spirit of Yahweh. By the 1st century, a remnant of Jews had geographically returned from Babylon to Jerusalem. However, the sweeping spiritual transformation Ezekiel and Jeremiah promised had not yet occurred. Look at this relief from the Arch of Titus, showing Roman soldiers carrying the menorah. It is physical proof that Israel remained politically subjugated and spiritually compromised. Despite occupying the Promised Land, the people were existing in a state of ongoing spiritual exile, known as galut. This created a tense cultural climate. 1st century Judea was saturated with a desperate expectation for a second Exodus, led by a messianic figure. The geographical return from Babylon was insufficient. Israel required a definitive intervention to activate the promises of Ezekiel and Jeremiah and finally end the exile. This intervention arrives during a highly structured Second Temple Passover Seder, an event now commonly known as the Last Supper. Yeshua gathers 12 disciples around the table, deliberately representing the eschatological restoration of the 12 tribes of Israel. They follow the strict progression of the traditional Seder meal. After eating, Yeshua deliberately lifts the third cup. In 1st century practice, this specific vessel is the cup of redemption. It symbolizes the blood of the Passover lamb that originally secured Israel's physical freedom from Egypt. Looking at the Greek text, Yeshua declares, "This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins." This mirrors Sinai, positions him as the Passover lamb, and triggers Jeremiah's prophesied mechanism of forgiveness. This action takes the temporary external bond formed at Sinai and converts it into an eternal, unbreakable heavenly reality. In a single, repeatable liturgical act, Yeshua synthesizes the historical memory of Sinai, the physical redemption of Passover, and the internal heart transformation of the prophets into one cohesive reality. The death of the Messiah at Golgotha is not a tragic defeat. It is the deliberate, legal inauguration of the renewed covenant. The physical cost of this covenant blood satisfies the prophetic expectations of Zechariah, serving as the necessary payment to break the chains of spiritual captivity. The Messiah's sacrifice does not signal the rejection of Israel, nor does it abolish the Torah. Conversely, the renewed covenant represents the Torah's ultimate vindication. By curing the human heart, it finally makes true obedience to the law possible. The blood of the covenant also expands the inheritance of Abraham, opening the door for people from all nations of the earth to be grafted into the original promise. This creates a new lived reality. Absolute forgiveness clears the way for the Spirit to dwell permanently within humanity. The long, painful spiritual exile is over. Yahweh's with cleansed, responsive hearts of flesh. The renewed covenant does not replace the law with grace. It provides the exact grace necessary to internalize the law, empowering believers from the inside out to walk faithfully with Yahweh.